good afternoon, whatever time of day it is that you are listening, folks. Thank you very, very much for listening. Date today is the 18th of December, year of our Lord 2023. Welcome to yet another edition of the Coping Hour, hosted by Nicholas Hinkle. Hope you guys all had a fantastic weekend. Only got a few more of those left in 2023, am I right? Let's talk about some NFL. We got a big NBA slate planned for the middle of the show. Yes, it is basically just a big Pistons thing, but maybe your favorite team will get mentioned because we're going to bounce around some trade ideas. Before we do that, though, we talk about weekends winding up in 2023. Well, that could only mean one thing. The NFL is almost over. Man, boo. Cue the boos in post-production, Nick. Boo. Yeah, tomato. No more NFL. Yeah, the season always flies by, man. You say the same thing every year. You get into week 5, you go, it's already week 5? Man, it always goes by so fast. But then in the back of your brain, you're like, dude, we have like 3 more months of this. Like, I don't care. I'm not thinking about that right now. Week 10 comes around. It's already week 10? Oh. And then you kind of start to feel it. Conference championship weekend, I think, in college football is like really the big moment where you're the oh shit moment where you're like, oh no, like, okay, it's over. Yeah. But let's talk about some of the NFL games that happened over the weekend. Why don't we start with the Lions? I think that would make the most sense, right? We just start with the Lions. How about Jared Goff? Through weeks of, I think the wheels are starting to fall off. I think it's over. Like, we're not same old Lions, but like this idea that we were guaranteed a playoff win, which was technically never true, but we just convinced ourselves that it was. That was starting to slip, and we were just like, get into the playoffs. You know, there's also that part of you that maybe we should have started with the Chargers game because Brandon Staley getting fired. Well, now this ultimate premonition of Ben Johnson going to the Chargers, right? As we have been telegraphing it on this show, and even as I fucking said it on the Bun and Cardigan show before this ever started, like Ben Johnson was always going to the Chargers, right? So we're leading up to this game talking about that, and people are saying, well, if Jared Goff wants to get paid, he's got to play really well these next few games. And if he doesn't do that, maybe you package him and Ben Johnson, send them both to the Chargers, give us a little Justin Herbert. You know what I mean? Like, people, that was a real thing that people were talking about this week before the Lions-Broncos game. Then Jared Goff throws for 278 yards and 5 touchdowns. Then Sam Laporta catches 3 touchdowns. Then the Lions almost have 200-yard rushers in the same game. Do you guys remember when we went like 6 years without one? I think it was 5 years without one. Between, who was it? It was like Reggie Bush in like 2013, and then it wasn't until like 18 or 19. I think it was Kerryon Johnson, right? I might have that wrong. I remember it was Matt Patricia's like 3rd game. It was against the Patriots. And that was his first win, was a game against the Patriots. So it was kind of like, is Matt Patricia going to steer the ship in the right direction? How about the Eagles? We'll get back to the Lions, but hey, we're talking about Matt Patricia all of a sudden. So earlier this season, Darius Slay is like, if Matt Patricia calls plays for this defense, I will leave. I will commit insurrection, and my ass is out of here. And the Eagles were like, all right, fine. Matt Patricia won't call the plays. Darius Slay was like, all right. Fast forward to, what are we in, like week 14? Darius Slay has surgery on his knee and is like, hey, guys, I'm going to miss some time. Like, you guys got this. You're going to be great without me. You've been stout all year. Like, you got this. You'll be fine. And the Eagles are like, Matt Patricia is going to fucking call plays for the rest of the season because their secondary has been getting diced up. So what do we always say? The fish rots from the head. I guess if Darius Slay is out, this is probably your time to shake some shit up, right? So that sucks for him. It sucks for Eagles fans. Sorry about that. Sorry that you're going to have to endure the wrath of Matt Patricia, even if that's like what his whole thing is like defense. Okay. Have fun with that. Back to the Lions, though. We talk about having 200-yard rushers almost in the same game. How about the fact that we might have 2,000-yard rushers? David Montgomery is going to get there. Like, he's 100% going to get there because he's a workhorse, right? Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he's going to have like one more Raiders-esque game where he goes for like 150 if he really wants to be in the mix there. But having 100 on the dot against the Broncos does not hurt Friendo. it stinks that it was another game where it was like that Hutch moment feels like it's coming any minute. Any second, Hutch is going to break through. He's going to do one of those spin moves. Russ is going to bounce around in the pocket for just a fraction of a second too long, and Hutch is going to get in there. It just didn't happen. It just did not happen. The amount of time, honestly, that dude spends being held is insane. The amount of time that he spends being doubled is insane. Like, he just can't get in the mix. There's just too much attention on him. Really, really frustrating. Let's look at some of these other games, though. Lions getting back on track and having just a dominant win. Really slow to get out of the gate. Took until, I think, the second quarter to even score. But then after that, man, it's crazy on the first possession that they ended up scoring. We had to punt on 2 straight possessions, including one where Isaiah Buggs had that big fumble recovery into positive territory, still didn't get anything out of it. They're in the middle of that third drive before they score, and I text my friend. I was like, they're going to get booed if they don't score here. Because that was brewing. If we came out flat, the boo birds were going to start to fly. You know what I mean? Credit to the Lions. Because it never came to that. What else do we got? Bears-Browns. That one ended up being quite the feast. Because it was, honestly, the Bears had a game a few weeks ago. I don't remember who it was against, but it was viewed as like the perfect tank game because Justin Fields was awesome, and then the Bears lost in really dumb fashion, but like they looked fine for most of the game, and they just blew it in the end, quote unquote, when they were supposed to. Oh, it was that's hilarious. It was the game against the Lions. It was literally the game against the Lions in Ford Field when we scored like 18 points in the final like 6 minutes. However many wasn't it like 23? The Lions were down big late in that game, and they had to come back over the Bears. But Justin Fields was awesome, so I was like, whatever. Kind of not the case today. Or on Sunday, rather. Kind of not the case at all. Went like 19 for 100, 164 yards. I think it's because he didn't get to wear his visor because the weather, it was raining. The weather was inclement. He couldn't wear a visor. I feel like maybe that's where all of his power is. We talk about how Blake Griffin's career fell off a cliff. It's not because his knees stopped working. It's because he shaved his beard. And that's where all the power ended up being stored while he was in Detroit. That's why he was so good, because it was the first time he grew out the beard. I would assume for Justin Fields, that's just in his visor. What Amari Cooper did to this Bears defense to tie this game up with a couple minutes, like 3.5, 4 minutes left to go in the game, 17-17. Heart rip out of the year, potentially. Well, not so fast. Not to quote our late friend Lee Corso, who is still technically alive. David Njoku has got to be the leading candidate for, can this guy play somewhere else? Can he play somewhere that has a quarterback and doesn't have 39-year-old Joe Flacco throwing to him? 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, when Joe Flacco gets his job, most of us had the same. There are some of you out there who are so locked in that you're like, yeah, of course I knew Joe Flacco was still in the league. But Joe Flacco was still in the league. And then fast forward to Sunday, and I'm like enjoying watching him throw a spiral. Like, I'm enjoying the Joe Flacco experience. I don't care about the 3 picks, honestly. Threw 3 picks. He also threw 3 touchdowns. He also won the game. But David Njoku is I just have always wanted him. He's a prime candidate to just be somewhere else because I think he's so talented. Love his frame. Love the way that he plays. Also just love his general, because sneaky, I love to judge on-court NBA fashion. But, like, on-field NFL shit is really where I shine because I actually lived that, right? Like, I actually tried to do that at some points in my, like, life. Even if it was high school. Like, I was still out there with a sleeve. Son, I was still doing it, right? David Njoku's got it going on. Big win for the Browns. Was rooting for them the whole time. Moving on, I don't know. The only thing about the Dolphins-Jets game that I want to say is I am one of the few people maybe that believes Aaron Rodgers, that believes that he's not, because I don't think it's entirely wrong to say that the Jets are kind of, or even if it's just Aaron Rodgers, that this like hype is manufactured that like he's not fucking coming back. And at this point, by the way, that the Jets have been eliminated from playoff contention, I don't think he is. The most recent report as of this recording, by the way, was that he could be medically cleared to return to play this week, for this upcoming week. But at this point, you're probably like, there's no point in doing that. But the reason that I believe that if he could, like if he actually can, he would, is because Is it obvious to anybody else that Aaron Rodgers is on a warpath? Aaron Rodgers is on a mission to prove that medical science is bullshit. And that this is all like vaccine shit. I swear to God it is. He's probably going to come out with some documentary where he was taking all of this, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like earth shit. You know what I mean? Like natural ingredients of the earth. The earth's milk is like how he healed his body. The word is like right there. It's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't think of what I'm trying to say. I am 10.5 minutes into this take. Like I'm not canning it. So we're just going to move on. But Aaron Rodgers, if he's going to come back, holistic? That's not the word. That's not the word. Aaron Rodgers come back. Come win comeback player of the year. How brutal would it be? If, like, literally all DeMar Hamlin had to do was step onto a football field this year and he was going to win comeback player of the year. And then Aaron Rodgers is like, not so fast. I'm about to tear my Achilles, and in 3 months I'm going to be playing football again. And I'm Aaron Rodgers, who's also 38, who's also old. Some of these other games, it stunk to see Will Levis go down. Because as soon as Tennessee starts to sink their teeth into the idea that this kid might be it. I say kid. Will Levis, the 24-year-old rookie, brutal. Brutal to hear that. To hear this guy who can almost rent a car bringing Titans fans a lot of optimism was exciting because I was not on board with the Will Levis train when it left the station out of Kentucky. I was laughing when he fell to the second round and the cameras are on him and they're like, look how not mad this guy is. Stinks to lose that way to Case Keenum, too, especially because he tried to throw the game away. Man, when it was 16-9 in this game, and I'm watching it, and I was like, Houston's driving. I was like, please don't let them score. Because if this game goes to overtime, both of you guys stink. Too bad. It's going to be a tie. Case Keenum tried to throw the game away. Like maybe the worst throw I've ever seen in my life. Dalton Schultz just like ripped the ball out of the defender's hands. Saved the game. Potentially saved the season, by the way, because the Texans are still very much in it, right? That was fun. San Francisco game ended up being... That Cardinals team is just such a scrappy bunch, man. The score indicates that it wasn't really close, and honestly, it kind of wasn't the whole game. Like, kind of wasn't, but it for some reason felt like it was. Just a testament to the way that Arizona plays, I think. Buffalo and Dallas? I do not think there is a bigger environment in football, in the National Football League, than Buffalo. I love the field. I love the atmosphere so much. The weather is always such that it could always be a factor, you know. I'm honestly almost sad that they're finally getting a new stadium here in a few years. I don't remember what year that is, but I think we still have a couple. Because I love it. Like, I think it's better than Arrowhead. I think it's better than, I don't know, what else would people say? Like, Jerry World. Like, I think it's Buffalo. I really do. Foxborough would be, people wouldn't say Foxborough anymore. Love Buffalo. Huge win for them. And it's interesting because, you know, going into this game, what were people saying for MVP? Brock. Some people want Tyreek. Hey, why not? It's a weird year. It's kind of the point of this is that it's very wide open right now. Or people were talking about like Dak. Well, we're leaving this game and we're thinking, yeah, it could still be Dak. Or if the Bills run the table and they win out, and then they play Miami, I think, to end the year, and that would give them the division. They've already beaten Miami once this year, right? If the Bills do that, is Josh Allen winning MVP? Maybe. It's been a great deal of years since we've seen the parity that we're seeing in the NFL this year. Now, if we're being fair, a lot of that might have to do with injuries, because if you look at any division in the NFL, I think at least a third of their starting quarterbacks are out for the year, it seems like. But I'm not faulting the players for that. It is what it is. Guys are getting banged up like a lot. Feels like it's more than it usually is, but that's just because we're living in this year and we're not living in previous years anymore. Recency bias kind of a thing. But it's exciting because the teams at the top, we've seen holes poked in every single one of them, all of them. I thought Baltimore was and then Cleveland was like, nuh-uh, look what we can do. It's not that hard to beat you guys. Oh, the Rams? Like, Sorry, against the Ravens. I'm not saying the Rams like as a team. Just they are not a top team. Want to clear that one up real quick. I just meant when the Rams were able to kind of fuck with the Ravens, you know? So, as a Lions fan, pretty encouraging and pretty exciting to me. And that was the NFL this week. All righty. Without giving you an oral history of what the Pistons season has been like, because honestly, my videos pretty much serve as that. And at this point, you all know. Really, all that matters is, as of this recording, the Pistons have lost 23 consecutive games. It has been communicated to the fans that the Pistons are looking at the trade market. That the next time we hear from the Pistons, from Woj, it's likely going to be, hey, they just went and got a guy that they hope can at least steer this thing back in the right direction. We're punting on this season. Honestly, it's over. Like, it's over. Most of the fans are on board with just losing the rest of the games just to make a point, right? So I think at this point, nobody is focused on going and getting a guy that gets us to the play-in. It's fine. Like, just make sure that by the end of the year, we've won like 18 games. At this point, you would be finishing pretty fucking strong if the Pistons finished with 18 wins, right? And over the last few weeks, but more specifically the last few days, as these reports have come out, people throwing around some names. You know, the early names that we were talking about this season were like Zach LaVine. I even made a video about it where I was in favor of it. But that's the interesting thing about time. Sometimes your brain just goes, you develop a new wrinkle. Some chemicals fuse together and they spark, and you get new ideas. Because when time passes, your fucking ideas are allowed to change. Your opinions are allowed to change if you learn new information. Or if you the vibes just feel different. The vibes feel different. I agree with the people who were saying, 2 weeks ago that if you do the Zach LaVine thing, it just feels like the Blake Griffin thing again. You're just getting a guy who's a little bit younger and like not as. Zach LaVine does kind of get hurt, but it just not really on the same level as Blake, it doesn't feel like, right? And then what's going to happen when he gets here? He's going to eat a ton of shots, and even if they go in, people are going to hate him. Even if those shots go in, people are going to hate him because he's going to be taking away from, like, unless it's like Cade setting him up, which I just don't really imagine that's what the relationship would be like between him and Cade. Oh, Nick, are you just assuming that Cade wouldn't have to be in the... Yes. Cade is not getting dealt in that deal. Maybe that's important to note here, too. I don't think the Pistons have any untouchables on the team, but the closest thing to that would be Cade. Like, you're always going to reserve the, well, what if you could do Cade for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Well, we can't do that anymore, but people were talking about that a few years ago, right? Like trading the number one pick, which would have turned into Cade. If that picked up in your ear, that was my computer, by the way. Sorry about that. A few years ago, we were talking about the number one pick for, like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah, you couldn't get away with that now. But there's always something that could be out there that, hey, Cade could be on the table. But again, for all intents and purposes, he's not on the list. That means that it would have to be Ivy that's involved in something here. Anything. Like, across the board, he just would. And there are a few things to that. But I think the most annoying one is that you would have to cash in on that chip as early as you do. If you really, really, really want to go get a guy who can turn things around here or help turn things around, you're going to have to put a guy like Jaden Ivey on the table. There's a world where you have to put a guy like Isaiah Stewart. It could be Jalen Duren. It's no shortage of guys. Nobody on this team is safe. And that part of it sucks. But you really got to sweeten the pot with this thing. And I still don't even think we can do that with first-round picks, is the other part of this that makes it so difficult. And I've had, back on the Bone and Cardigan show, I asked James to explain this to me all the fucking time. And I still don't get it. I'm sure some of you guys do get what I'm about to talk about, and you're going to try to tell me about it. I'm going to read it, and it's just not going to make sense. The Pistons can't trade a first-round pick for, like, a while because we owe the Rockets one, or the Knicks. I think it's the Rockets. We owe Houston a pick that hasn't conveyed for like 3 years. Like, we've been doing this dance for like 3 years. And until that pick that we owe them conveys, we can't move one. Again, I don't understand the fucking limitations of the CBA. The trade machine has never explained this to me. I've had people explain to me, and I don't get it. So for all intents and purposes, we're going to be moving throughout this segment assuming, okay, we can trade Jaden Ivey, but we can't trade first-round picks. I think we're just going to have to scrap that. I think we're just going to have to say Troy and his fiscal savviness, his trade savviness, he can figure something out. So what I want to do today is talk about 3 players that I want the Pistons to look at that I think would be amazing if they traded for. While I wrote them down, I realized I did kind of go in ascending order. So I guess it is kind of like a dream scenario, plan B, or like, I guess if all else fails, do this thing, is how I'm going to read them off. So it's going to be 3 players, and then from those 3 players, 3 stats that I like about those players and how the context of it fits in with Detroit. So for starters, this is like a dream scenario for the Detroit Pistons if they go and try and make a trade this year, which they will. Lauri Markkanen. Now, no shocks here. Kind of like the prize of the NBA right now, the guy that everybody's trying to go after. You've seen the Lakers thrown around. I think that have the Thunder been thrown around at all? If they have, it hasn't been enough. If they have, it has not been nearly enough. Because if there was ever a time for Sam Presti to look at his, and this is kind of coming to me in real time, was looking at his pile of assets, thinking like, when is going to be the right time? And that's kind of what I've always argued, is that like, at some point, the picks that you hoard, like, there has to be a right time to do something. I don't think there's any time like the present, first of all. What I love the most about Lauri Markkanen, not just this year, last year too, he was an all-star last year, right? For the first time in his career. Can we get a round of applause for a guy breaking out of NBA meme purgatory? Like, the guy's not a joke. The guy is, like, playing real-life basketball. Game against, well, I don't want to spoil one of the stats, so I don't want to say what I'm about to say. But he's playing meaningful minutes in games that matter against teams that matter, right? Like, deep into these stretches, giving you 38 and 17. 3 years ago, he was a meme on a team that stunk. And we were like, what a waste of a pick. Like, bust, boo, Lauri Markkanen. And now, man, let's talk about these 3 stats that I like. So the first one, last season he shot 6 free throws a game. I've talked about it all year. If the Pistons can't get to the line, they will not win games. And what has happened? They have not gotten to the line at all. There's nobody that can draw a whistle. 6 free throws a game isn't a ton, but honestly, we could use a lot of that around here. Right? Especially at his position, and especially with his size, with his mobility, the way that you would work him and Cade together in like some 2-man shit, going downhill, dude, he would draw like 10 attempts a game. And if he didn't, you would hope that Cade would finally get the whistle. You know how I think Lowry's attempts could also be higher if he was more in control of his limbs? Because when you really watch him go downhill and like try to Euro and then like do a little hook, there's too much movement in his limbs, and it always makes contact look over exaggerated to a point where it's like, okay, he looks like one of the wacky arm waving inflatable tube mans. You know what I mean? So we got to work on that and we can get those attempts up, but until then, it's still a really good number. Second stat that I like from Lauri Markkanen, career high 6 assists per game. Nick, that doesn't seem very high. 6 assists per game does not seem that high. Doesn't seem very impressive to me. It's not. It's not high. That's the beauty. I don't want it to be, because this is a guy who's like, I'm not the setup man. I'm the man you set up. Give me the ball. I'm about to score. I love it. I love a guy who knows his role. You know what the Pistons need more of on this team? A guy who just motherfucking scores, but actually does it. Not just plays with that mentality and then produces none of it. Right? We got a few of those on the team. Lauri Markkanen actually does it. Made an all-star team last year. Did I mention that? Final stat. This is what I almost spoiled earlier. 50 minutes played against Phoenix. Obviously a career high. The game that I was referencing earlier has 38 and 17 playing in real games early in the season that matter. They feel like they have stakes. They have consequences, right? Figuring out the identities of these teams early on. And Lauri Markkanen plays 50 minutes and gives them 38 and 17. Huh? I appreciate any dude who just won't come out of the game. That's cool. That wouldn't be me. But I love it. So that's the dream scenario for Detroit, obviously, right? Utah's going to want too much. I'm crazy to think that this is even in our wheelhouse, right? Do I believe that the Lakers even have enough? Like, no. No. But Oklahoma City does. If your priority is capital, Oklahoma City does. How much money does he make? Like 25 million? I have no idea how much money Lauri Markkanen makes, which is another obstacle for Detroit. Because then, like, we don't have that much money tied up with that many guys. We don't. So that's going to make it really tough. But that's why it's a dream scenario. On to Plan B. Plan B. I want the Detroit Pistons to trade for Kyle Kuzma. I think this is a marriage that has always been meant to happen. I think this idea is rooted in my belief that Isaiah Stewart needs to come off the bench. I think he needs to be the first or second guy off the bench at power forward. I think if you get a guy like Kyle Kuzma, I think he actually fits that modern traditional role of a power forward that we're trying to get Isaiah Stewart to play anyways, right? And I think that with Stu, I think the shit that he brings to the table, if you even want to say that scoring punch, I think it's just going to be more valuable, especially with his size in that second unit. When we talk about Kyle Kuzma, well, why don't we just get into the stats, and that's how we'll talk about him. So 3 stats that I like from Kyle Kuzma. This one's just weird. Shooting splits 47, 37, 71 on back-to-backs in his career. 66 back-to-backs, his splits are 47, 37, and 71. Why is this important? Because it's the best splits of any days of rest like that he has. Off of 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or on a back-to-back, these are his best splits. That feels weird from Kyle Kuzma. That's a dude who, you want to talk about staying ready, I guess. That's it. Next one. I like to talk about this. If I'm Troy Weaver and I'm trying to, get some evil off of the streets, do some street justice, I'm looking at a guy like Kyle Kuzma who's shooting a career 50% against Detroit in his career. I think it's 16 games. 50% against Detroit. If you bring that just home, a Flintstone, if you just bring him home, you're cleaning crime up off the streets. Then he can't fucking terrorize us anymore. You know what another one I like is? From earlier this year, they played a game against Charlotte. Washington did. They lost by 3. But our boy, Kyle Kuzma, 28, 10, and 9, and he was plus 13. That's a guy who goes out there, he gets his, he makes sure shit doesn't go wrong, at least while he's out there. That's vet shit. That's a good vet right there. He's making sure that I guess because if we're talking about plus minus, I guess in this instance, it would technically be selfish. I want that even more, honestly, on my basketball team. That's what I want even more. But then you're just bouncing him around from purgatory to purgatory. Yeah, but it's also his home. I have, honestly, I don't know if you could tell. I don't know if it ended up this way on camera. But when I wrote all 3 of these stats down, I was super on board with it. And now that I'm reading them out loud and I realize how, not serious they are, I've actually kind of deprogrammed. I've unlearned that this is something that I actually want. But the point that I would stand by is the one that I made at the beginning, which is if you start him and you put Stu on the bench behind him coming off first or second, I just think that fits closer to what Troy wants out of Isaiah anyways. Let's go to the third and final player. The thing that those first two players have in common, play the same position. Well, Nick, why would we do that? Because Troy Weaver really likes to. I don't know why we would. It's literally the only reason I put two power forwards. Honestly, because I think Lauri Markkanen is like a dream scenario for most teams. I would have said the same thing about Keegan Murray, but I got a whole spiel about that we can do later. But why don't we get a little weird? Let's talk about Anthony Simons. You want to talk about if Jaden Ivey is going to be first to go. Well, if it's for Anthony Simons, he's definitely gone, right? I don't know if Portland would really be that interested in anything. Although Portland did do a workout with Jalen Duren. That's got to be crazy, Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey and like stuff for Anthony Simons. What do I like about Anthony Simons? What stats did I write down? He's dealing with I don't remember what his injury was, but he was dealing with something a couple weeks ago. First game back in like 2 weeks. He puts up 27 on 28 shots. That dude was eager to get back out there. 27 on 28 shots. I said earlier, not that long ago, maybe 5 minutes ago, that the Pistons have a lot of guys on the team who play with that scores mentality but can't actually score. They play as the I'm not the setup man, I'm the man you set up mentality. 27 points on 28 shots is kind of that. It's kind of that. But it's Anthony Simons. You know what I mean? Can I zag? Can I give you a stat that I don't like for his second one? 5.6 assists. I'm serious. From Anthony Simons, this is what I want out of you. Literally just shoot the basketball. Do those little cuts that you like to do. That's fine. Cade has great vision. If Killian's still on the team, he's got great vision. He can pass really, really well. Sneaky, Bogdanovich can pass really well, too. Just keep doing that. Do not pass the ball. That's not what I want you here for. Although he's had some like bizarre assist-to-turnover ratio numbers in his career. I don't think he does right now because he's like sneaky turned the ball over a lot in like the 10 games that he's played this year. Which is ironic because you know what he's not doing? When he's playing big minutes, like when you see Anthony Simons playing like 35 minutes, not 35, but like 27 to 30 minutes in his career, he doesn't foul that much. Pretty disciplined on the defensive end. Doesn't get that many steals, though. I thought Kuzma got more steals than he does. That's something that I wanted to mention. Every time I watch the Wizards, or the Lakers, whatever, I remember just always being like, damn, like Kyle Kuzma plays defense. But then the national narrative is just always that he doesn't. So then I'm always just like, I feel like I'm getting tricked because I just don't know if what I'm seeing wrong. But every time, because I just feel like every time I watch, he comes away with like a block and 3 steals. Kyle Kuzma plays defense. I guess he doesn't, though. Those are the players I want the Pistons to trade for. In that particular order, too, by the way. I don't know who it's going to end up being. I do think it's kind of... If it's not a power forward, it's a small forward. It's a wing, 100%. I don't think they're going after a guard. Although, I guess they could if it ended up having to be Jaden that was attached to it. Nick, you didn't mention OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam? No, man, because I guess what I'm confused about is, are the reports true that we've heard about each of them individually that, like, they just won't re-sign wherever they get traded? Like, they just won't? If that's true, then, like, don't risk it, man. If you think you can get him in free agency, get him in free agency. Hey, man, if you get some backdoor handshake agreement, sure, I guess. For either of them, right? If I had to pick, for right now, I would want Siakam, but I know that for the next, 6 years, I would be like, that OG Anunoby is pretty nice. You know what I mean? What about Tobias Harris? Those rumors are wild. Wild. I love Tobias Harris. It's no shade, but if the Pistons' 23 game in a row mid-December shakeup, Woj bomb comes through, and we shipped off, whoever and Bogdanovich and what for fucking Tobias Harris. Like, lame. I think what Tobias is doing for Philly is way more important than what he would be doing in Detroit, honestly, because he fits that team well. He plays an important role for them, and they're playing really good basketball. Daryl Morey, please, I beg of you, I implore you to not do this under no circumstances. I don't care what Troy does. Here's a take. I honestly, this segment's running really long, 20 minutes, but look, we might as well just let it ride. It's an NBA segment. Who cares? If I'm Tom, and I know that there's a chance that, hey, and I'm not saying anything because I don't honestly know, but if I'm Tom Gores, I do know this. If it's in the back of my head that if they only win 10 games this year, Troy is gone, do I really want to force him to make a dumb trade? Do I really want to do what I've done for the last however many GMs, at least Stan Van Gundy? I swear he did it for Jeff Bauer, too. Did he do it with Stefanski? I'd have to go back and look, but he probably did one of those types of... Well, no, I don't think he did with Stefanski. But you put a gun to your GM's head and you say, fucking dance. Do something. Do you really want to do that right before firing him, if that's what you plan on doing? Because the truth is, even if you did do that, but let's assume that you didn't, one thing that we love to talk about with Troy Weaver is that he inherited nothing, that he walked into a situation where he had nothing. And in a lot of ways, they're not wrong. Like, if you really wanted to be nitpicky, be like, well, Bruce Brown, he's, yeah, I guess, right? But even in the trade market, what did Bruce Brown get you? Go back and look at that trade. It got us John and Musa, who by the approximation of most was the worst player in the NBA the year before he was. And we got a second-round pick. But it wasn't just any second-round pick. It was the least favorable of 4 that Brooklyn owned. I believe it was from Toronto. So we got the worst player in the NBA and the worst of 4 second-round picks in exchange for Bruce Brown. So, yeah, Bruce Brown, on the surface, you'd think is a good asset. I guess he fucking wasn't at the time. I say all of this just to say, whoever the next GM ends up being, whenever they come along, the situation that they will be inheriting, light years better than what Troy had. And if nothing else, at the risk of, I guess, capping this off with like a thank God for Troy Weaver, getting on my knee, like, you got to give him credit for that because that much is true. But Troy, please, don't let Tom pressure you. But if you're going to make the trade, make it awesome. I think this guy was having like a manic episode when he sent this email. It's no shade, Kendall. But I got to read it, dude. And maybe I don't want to put it up on the screen. It's not worth doing that. But I'm just going to read it. I'm going to let the email do its thing. Hi, Mr. Noah. Longtime fan of the show and very in tune with the Detroit and Chicago references of the show, so it has always been the funniest stuff to bring me up during a bad time. Now let's talk basketball. Nice. Well, thank you for that. First, does anyone care about fraudulent rookie of the years, or are we supposed to just live with the Chets and Ben Simmons of the world? Because, why is it just fuck Wemby and Spider-Man? Speaking of Jazz legends, how do we address the Josh Giddey problems as a Thunder fan? Obviously, I just want him off my basketball team, but odds someone trades with us for Josh Giddey are probably very bad. So do we just cut Josh Giddey for the sake of moral dilemma? I just want him gone. Shit too gross for me personally. Third and finally, can you talk about the Chicago Bulls? Because living in Chicago, it's the team everyone's always yelling at me about, Kobe White. Should I believe this modern Linsanity? And will they ever become a good basketball? Thank you for the email, Kendall. So the first thing I would like to address in this email is, does anybody care about fraudulent rookie of the years? Yeah. I like to bring this up more than I probably should. The whole Ben Simmons rookie of the year thing and how fucking mad people were. Like, truly, honestly, and genuinely, how irate people were that Ben Simmons was eligible for Rookie of the Year. It's interesting to me that people don't care as much about that with Chet, at least from what I've seen. Maybe they do, and I just am not in the right channels, right? But so far, it seems like, and I think maybe it's because people aren't taking it, well, it's not that people aren't taking it seriously. People like Chet Holmgren. But I think it's just in everyone's brain that, like, as long as Victor Wembanyama plays, 60 games, does that meet the criteria for, like, eligibility? I don't remember what that number is. That I just remembered about that as I said that. But, you know, he plays 62 games, 65 games. Like, yeah, okay. It's going to be Victor Wembanyama. I think they would even give it to him if there wasn't criteria. He could play 50 games and they would still give it to him, or whatever the number is, right? I don't know if people care about it. In longevity, they do not. In the moment, they think they do. Well, I'm sorry. They do. And then they realize a few years later how ridiculous they sounded. What was the second question? Oh, the Josh Giddey thing. I don't know. I don't know. Because I've just heard like 8 variants of the same story. And there are some where it's like, oh, okay, so he was like 19 and she was just in a nightclub and lied. And he was like, oh, okay, well, you're in a nightclub, so okay, that makes sense. You've like heard that version. And then there's another version where he's like 20 and she's like, I don't know. It's not my job to litigate it. It's not any of our jobs as fans. He's not Karl Malone, right? Like, there are levels to this shit. So at least they have. I don't know where that's going. I don't know where that's going. This is why I have not brought up the Josh Giddey thing yet, because what the fuck do you want anybody to say about it? We don't know literally anything. We know literally nothing about it. Like, everything is like third party through some screenshot of a snap. And then everything that we hear is from like the woman's parents' lawyer's brother, his lawyer, the lawyer of the family's brother's lawyer, communicating like fourth party on it. The fuck? I don't know. If he did something wrong, jail, prison. But I don't know. The Bulls, we did a video on the Bulls. They are honestly, this is going to upset a lot of people. It might rub some people the wrong way. I apologize. I would rather watch the Wizards, honestly, than watch the Bulls, with all due respect. And I watch the Pistons almost every night. I've given myself more days off from the Pistons this year than I have in the last, like, 5 years combined. I'm serious. Because I don't need to, like, to explain it. Like, you will have to excuse this. Like, of course, the team that's lost 23 games in a row. Hoping to make it to 30. Baby steps. Let's get to, well, we got to get to 25, and then we'll get to 30. All right. I got nothing else to add to that email. It was just really funny. So about a week ago, we got an email from Alex. And I don't need to read the email because I can just summarize it super quickly and then go into the spiel that I wanted to go in. But thank you to Alex Collins for the email. Doxed. Ha! Thanks for the email, loser. Get doxed. No, but thanks, dude. Was asking about my take about ESPN's A-Team broadcast because I kind of derailed myself a little bit when I was talking about it a week ago, and I said I would get back to it at some point. And I figured to close out the show today, we can start to talk about this because I care about broadcasting a lot and the craft of it, the art of a broadcaster. You know, like one of my favorite things, honestly, dude, about not the NBA, but like about League Pass, or specifically certain streaming services that names will be redacted because I'm not a Fed. But we all know what I'm talking about. My favorite thing, though, about these games, about League Pass, is getting the in-arena feed. So when the real-life game, like when the game cuts to commercial, it instead cuts to like them playing like make a layup, a free throw, and a three-point shot for $10,000. Like, you just get to watch that instead. There are two reasons why I love that. One, because it's just objectively better than commercials, and I don't know, it's just a fun experience. Two, because I love the theater and the performance of a professional sports game. It doesn't just like, I wish we could see that for the NFL. For like baseball and the NHL, I don't think it would be as fun. But for the former two, I think the NBA is just the best at like in-game entertainment, honestly. And it's just that. It's the entertainment and the effort, the work that goes into it, the production that goes into it that I find so interesting. But this is beside the point, and literally exactly what happened a week ago when I started talking about ESPN's A-Team broadcast and then started talking about something else. But I ultimately did kind of make the point that I wanted to make about them with Mike Breen and Doc Rivers and Doris Burke. Obviously, people take great exception to Doc Rivers being involved in anything, even as just a coach of a head basketball team. People would object to that. But hearing him on a broadcast can be especially rough. No pun intended with his voice. Doris Burke, no notes, honestly. Like 0 notes. Mike Breen, I have less than 0 notes. You can literally do whatever you want forever. You're fucking Mike Breen, right? But their broadcast doesn't have a presence to it. The only reason that it does is because of Mike Breen, and that's no disrespect to Doris Burke because she's an icon, she's a queen. But I've truly felt, as much as people like to shit on them, Mark Jackson, Jeff Van Gundy, and Mike Breen was a perfect broadcast team. That was the perfect booth. You know, when you talk about college football, whether it was Brent Musburger, Vern Lundquist, Keith Jackson, right? I believe you can say it with Chris Fowler now. As soon as you heard their voice, you knew that was the game you were supposed to be watching. And honestly, this is going to sound corny. If I ever meet Kirk Herbstreit, that's what I want to say to him specifically, is I know if I hear your voice in 2023 going into 2024, if I hear Kirk Herbstreit, I know that's the game I'm supposed to be watching, because that's the biggest moment of the week, right? If you hear them, that's like the biggest stage of the week. And so if I'm using that same logic with any major game in the NBA, and it's tough when it's a Wednesday, and usually they don't do the proper A-team unless it is like a Friday or a Saturday night or something, or a holiday. But I just don't feel that with what they have now. And part of that you could argue is just because they're new. And, any of these teams, like we talk about how Chris Fowler is quote unquote in there now. Well, that's because there were a few years where in my brain there was just this resentment. Like, you're not Brent Musburger. Sorry, that's not your fault, but you're not him. You're Chris Fowler. Like, I'm not interested in this. I've had a weird relationship with Brad Nessler too, which is weird because as somebody who was playing like the NCAA 06s of the world, on PS2, like I grew up with Brad Nessler being the voice of those games. But for some reason, isn't it wild that Lee Corso was in those games too? And they would do he would do like the headdress pick too. Huh. Man, the production value even on those PS2 games was so crazy. But I digress. I think I just wish that they didn't break the band up. And even though I'm sure this new one will get there, honestly, I don't. That's the take, as I don't think they're going to get the wheels off the ground. And I think for some reason, maybe Doc just gets a job somewhere. Maybe, honestly, it's just something as simple as that in like a year or whatever. But I bet they break this band up, try to reform something old, or haphazardly patch together a new team and just re-roll the dice. Probably keep Doris Burke. I think you can keep Doris Burke. And that's the take. I just stopped recording, knowing full well I had to send off the show. Like, knowing full well I hadn't signed off. I just was like, stop recording. So, okay, I guess I'll just splice this together as if it's two separate segments, which it now technically is. They will exist as two separate video files, but like, what the hell, Nick? I guess, honestly, I can use this final couple minutes here to say, yeah, the Tom Gores ransom bit I'm not doing that anymore. And I am not posting the fucking screenshot of it, like splicing it into the video. But a dude on Reddit the other day was like, would forming an organized protest outside of the arena do anything? Stop. January 6ing the Detroit Pistons. How had nobody thought of it? It's simply too brilliant. How could it possibly fail? What are we doing, guys? This is exactly what I was talking about. And I'm not saying that I'm, like, influencing these people. I'm just saying I don't want to willingly participate, even if it's satirically, in, like, insurrecting the Pistons. When people actually want to, like, I don't want to get put on a list for real. You know, everybody wants to be part of the revolution until it's time to start the revolution. Hey, if you're going to throw that in my face, I'm fucking in. Let's do this protest. Don't do that to me, because the peer pressure will get to me and I will fucking join the revolution, fucker. But if I have a choice and you're not peer pressuring me, I'm taking a step back. I am kneeling. I am bowing to the Detroit Pistons. I'm sorry. Ransom over. We can all go home. It's like Waco all over again. Only we left the building. We did it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video. Be sure to subscribe. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can leave 5 stars. Fun episode today, folks. I will catch you guys on Friday.
Computers now have
In the
primary
next
control.
Beautiful.
Primary control.
Beautiful.
Primary control.
Beautiful.
Primary control.
Beautiful.